I guess I'll just charge you money for this. They were like, yeah, that's fine, just charge us. And it was like, we've not set a fee. I could just charge you anything.
This is like almost exactly the same thing as when they try to tell us, like, oh, the building needs to be meeting all of these sustainable criteria. Yeah, sure. Don't worry. We'll have it by the submission. By the submission, we have all 5 diagrams that show exactly how it works that we did the night before.
Yeah, fully. But like, I was looking at like other people's reports that had been submitted, and it's like the designs of these like estates and streets are so much nicer because they've actually used the criteria. Whereas I'm trying to just force the criteria to work for my street. It's like, no, it will work. It's like, no, it doesn't. It really doesn't.
Keep
It shouldn't
gaslighting. Keep
work,
gaslighting.
but
You just don't understand the design. You won't understand it until it's actually complete.
the thing is, we're getting paid if it fails or not, so fuck them.
Oh,
Give
okay.
us
Well, you
the
don't even need
money.
to gaslight them
Yeah,
then. That's good shit.
yeah.
Okay, should we do this?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Take my gloves off. Okay. 3, 2, wait. On go, remember?
On go. Okay, 3, 2, 1, then go.
Yes.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, go.
Mr. Pop.
The idea that spaces are literally for everybody and that you can share something with anybody indiscriminately is false.
Hey there guys, Callum from the future. Some of you may have noticed from the title of this episode that we are going to be discussing a very sensitive topic. Later on in this episode, we will be discussing suicide. Here at Architov, we wanted to present you with a trigger warning, which would allow you to make the decision to not continue listening to the episode if this was potentially too sensitive for you. We completely understand and we wish you all the best and hope you'll return for the next episode. If you currently are experiencing hardship and are potentially considering suicide, please don't. Down in the description, you will be able to find a helpline where you can get in touch with someone who can help you through this. Life is worth living. A few years ago, one of my best friends attempted suicide. Thankfully, people were able to save them through the help of Samaritans, one of the helplines that you will find in the description. My friend was able to fight against this feeling and to continue going on living. He was able to overcome this crisis with help, and I'm sure you will be able to as well. So please consider getting in touch with the helplines below if you do need this assistance. Now, let's get back to your regular scheduled programming.
Yeah, I'll
Get
take
off,
us off.
man.
So,
Yeah.
welcome to episode 2, for which we don't yet have a title, but we will soon.
Yeah, we're not using that tentative title.
It was a good title.
I'm
Okay.
outlawing that title.
Okay, the title's outlawed. We'll have a new title later. Don't worry. Or we'll just call it episode 2. Anyways, we're just going to talk about some current architecture events today. Architecture doesn't move very fast. So, when we do these current event things, there's usually just one event or maybe 2 to talk about. But before we kick things off, let's just do a quick round of introductions. I'm Zach, again, just like last time, from Germany. Well, I'm American and I'm in Germany. Sorry, I thought so, yeah.
You chill. I'm Callum from the UK.
And I'm Ben from America.
We have far too many Americans on this podcast that I've realized. We need more people outside of the US.
I mean, it's really just 2.5.
do we count Zach as like a traitor to the US?
I hope so. I am.
Okay, fair.
But you were very close
guess-
to say, like, we need some more Brits on the show. And then I would
No,
have
that's
absolutely called you out for some colonialist shit.
Nah, we don't need more Brits. One Brit's enough, let's be honest.
Well, I do think it's funny. We all came from this Discord where if you exit, our admin channel, you see all these different people, but it's just us on this podcast so far.
Yeah. I mean, we might get other people in at some point when they write stuff. Like Swan's writing stuff at the minute, so we might get Swan in on one of the podcasts to talk about his article that he's writing at the minute.
One
Well,
day
it
we'll
won't
have a
just
reason to
all
bring
be
in
us.
Stan for
God, getting it stabbed.
Yeah,
will
the
be
alien from the planet
wild.
Bolg.
Actually, Ben, so I'm glad that you're on today, because I wanted to ask you specifically, because you're situated in this context, and before we dive into anything totally architectural related, very, very current events, I need to know what's going on the college campuses in the US. And it is like tangentially related to architecture, because I notice it's happening at Yale. I notice it's happening at Columbia. And usually when things are happening at Yale and Columbia, it's some new annoying discourse in the architecture world I'm going to have to hear about. But this is a much, much more problematic issue. And I don't know if there's anything that you can tell us from the America side about what's going on.
Well, I guess related back to architecture, one thing that I noticed was everybody was making a big deal about some pop-up library installation they made at the Columbia site. It's like, yeah, okay, we're distracted from the actual reason they're there to find some pretty building that's, or just
Oh my
installation
God.
that's put up. But yeah, it's really hit or miss. Like you heard Scav say, Kent's doing nothing for it. So it's either you either have the massive protests where they're trying to shut it down, or you just have people being completely silent at this point.
Yeah. So from what I've
Yeah.
heard is like a few days ago, there was some big heavy protests at NYU, at Columbia, obviously against the genocide in Palestine and the administration and the university's support of it, which is very interesting coming from Columbia, who is one of the largest landowners in Manhattan and has a lot of people on their boards that are related to Lockheed Martin and various technology and weapons companies. And I think they're very upset with their students protesting against the targets of their industry at the moment.
I mean, I think that's the same pretty much constantly. Like,
Yeah.
students for a lot of time have always been at the forefront of fights like this, and almost always they are vilified by the place they're actually fighting against, sort of thing. Like, I think almost like eventually it'll turn around where in 20 years time, sort of thing, when hopefully this is all resolved, Columbia will hold up the sign and be like, we fought against it. It's like, no, you fucking didn't. Like, fuck off. But they're 100% going to use the students that they're currently trying to combat in future and promote them as like, we were at the forefront of these fights, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like that, it's the same shit happens constantly, and they're gonna just do it with this as well.
We're in the middle of the same cycle, because the same people that are oppressing the students now are the ones who are so proud to protest Vietnam, which culminated in obviously the United States losing Vietnam, but also in 1970 to the massacre of students on Kent State's campus by the National Guard, which was an absolutely brutal fascistic incident. And that was like where the current people in charge of places like Columbia set their flag, right? And so now this new generation is turning against the world that they created.
Mm.
And you're absolutely right. In 20 years, we'll hear about how great Columbia is because of these protests. And then there will be some new fascistic thing that the students will protest against. And the cycle will repeat. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw somebody pulled funding from Columbia, so now it's all online courses for the rest of the semester. So I guess that's a small win, but doesn't really feel like it does much.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any students that listen to this, but I mean, I can at least say from my perspective, I support your efforts. Continue, do what you need. This is good work.
Yeah, definitely. It goes without saying that nobody here is excited to see the Zionists cause a genocide on American tax dollars. So free Palestine and all that.
I mean, on
100%.
anyone, just in general, really. It's not even on American tax dollars, to be honest. It's just none of us want
Right.
it.
Yeah. I guess I said that because like they're only able to do it with our funding, with our taxes coming in. Without that, none of this would happen.
True. Though we're at least not in Germany. So we have that going for us.
It's so bad over here. I mean, okay, so for a little while, my username on Blue Sky was Hamas.
Nice.
Just very blatant with it. Okay.
I was just like waiting to get raided any day because, like in Germany, they literally raid old women's houses, and arrest old women because they post something in support of Palestine.
Yeah, I don't know how that
Jesus
makes
fucking
sense to
Christ.
anybody. They're even in America, they're not necessarily arresting people, but they're showing up to their homes asking, "Hey, I saw you posted this on Facebook." It's like, how is this your problem?
Yeah. It makes no sense. And Berlin is trying to tell protesters that they can only speak English or German, no Arabic allowed at the protests.
Which is just clear
It's
racism
not.
at that point.
That's so bad.
It's really bad. It's really bad.
We had an Israeli spokesperson the other day manufacture an incident with the police at a Palestine march, and we know it's manufactured because there's like 20 minutes of him trying to manufacture it on video that have been released, and then there's multiple photos of him elsewhere along the march trying to do the exact same thing, but he only managed to successfully get 10 seconds. But that, like 10 seconds worth of video footage of a cop saying that he's worried because he's obviously a Jew that he's going to cause an issue there. Like, yeah, that's what the cop said, which is bad. But the cops also, like, when you see the full context, the cop has blatantly spotted him trying to rile up the situation and is like, if you're trying to get over to the other side, I can escort you around the march if you're really that desperate. And the guy's like, no, I need to go directly through the march. Just like, what the fuck?
This is insane.
But it got clipped, obviously, by himself, uploaded. To be fair, most news channels like Sky and shit like that have actually debunked it, showed that it's like entirely faked. But then politicians like fucking Rishi Sunak and stuff like that are still going on about it. It's like, we know it's fake. Like, shut the fuck up. Move on.
But there's so much of this that we know is fake. There's so much like media that they try to shove down our throats, and they don't tell us the whole story, but we already know the whole story. And they don't seem to care that we know that it's fake.
Yeah. I do think like UK media as a whole is starting to sour on stuff. Like fully outing that this Israeli spokesperson is trying to rile up this situation. Like they're starting to not have any more cares about this, and they're wanting it to stop. They're still like not fully going for it, not fully calling it a genocide and stuff like that. Still holding back a bit, but I think after those aid workers were killed, the 3 British aid workers, I think the UK is like, okay, this might need to end.
Yeah, after 2 million people lose their homes, 40,000 dead, takes a couple of white guys to get everybody's attention. And then the U.S. government told us that they were not deliberately attacked, and you can see pictures of the logo having a missile shot through it. Couldn't be any clearer that it was deliberate.
And like, it wasn't just deliberate. It wasn't like 3 salvos that were shot at the same time. They shot it once. The people that survived the first attack got out of the car, went to the like vehicle in front of them. Then that vehicle was shot at, and then the survivors of that got into the car in front of them, and then that was shot at. Like, it was 3 entirely separate airstrikes on the same cargo and like set of people. Like, it's a very deliberate attack. And even after the first one was hit, like, the aid workers told the IOF that they were hit, that they're aid workers, can you stop doing this? And then they were proceeded to be struck twice.
What's hilarious is that Israel, the IDF, tried to say it was a mistake. It was an accident, which was a very clever excuse on their part because they notoriously blow themselves up with their own weaponry. And so you would have almost believed that it was an accident if it wasn't for that string of events that you just described. I mean, they do blow themselves up all the time, like fucking cartoon characters. But this is not.
Yeah, I forgot what the name of it
thing.
was, but there's that doctrine that literally tells them to not let them get captured and just kill hostages instead of letting them be used as pawns later on.
Yeah, exactly. So
Oh,
the
yeah,
IDF
it's-
notoriously kills their own soldiers because of this. If they can.
It's got like some general's name or something like that, like some
Right.
old general's name. I can't remember, but yeah. Do we want to get onto our actual topic
Yeah.
now then?
So in a lighter news, let's say, we can all celebrate. The vessel at Hudson Yards is reopening. Yay!
Woo!
Right, that's the kind of meat of what we're going to discuss a bit today. This is a bit of a joke. We know it's not. No one here really likes the vessel. I mean,
No, it's shit.
yeah. I don't know. Can you guys describe it to me? Like, tell me what this vessel is.
It's a kebab. I'm not what else to say. It's a bunch of staircases that go nowhere in a circle. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's like literally nothing other to it than that. There's no destination. You're just climbing stairs indefinitely. You go to the top, and then you look at I guess your reflection in the glass skyscraper that's 20 meters from you, and then you go down, and you're out $10 and maybe a few hundred calories.
Like that's what I was thinking when I first saw this. It was like, surely it must have a good view. Like, if that's why it's like there, surely it must have a good view. And then I realized, wait, no, it's surrounded like on all four sides by just gigantic skyscrapers. You can't see shit. It's not like you see like the New York skyline when you're up there or anything like that. It's just,
Yeah,
there's no point for this.
you can see beautiful New Jersey.
No,
Oh,
you're missing the whole
God.
point. The point is that you take a picture of yourself there, and that's what you're actually there for, to see yourself in some
Ah.
space.
Yeah, one of the pictures that Hudson or related companies apparently owns when you take it.
Of course.
What?
Okay.
No shit. That's
This got revoked, but the original, there was like literally a terms and conditions with the vessel that any photo that you took of it, related companies owns.
fuck right off.
They pulled that. They pulled that after people said, "Hey, what the fuck?"
So it's like also not only ugly, pointless, but it's also visual pollution, trying to solicit the skyline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a privately funded thing, right? So the vessel itself was $250 million
Fucking Christ.
of unconditioned space that can house nobody, hold no function, paid out of pocket by related companies itself as the centerpiece to the 28-acre Hudson Yards development, which in and of itself is composed of several dozen buildings and towers that cost $25 billion, I think, and takes up a significant chunk of Manhattan's real estate. It is a shining glass. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it actually.
Cockpiece.
It looks like Avengers Tower.
Yeah, it does. Like it's got this Avengers Tower thing to it, except like mid. It's
Yeah.
everything is the only thing way you can describe everything is mid because like it's home to such cultural destinations that are named enticing things like the Shed.
Remember when New York was cool?
Oh wait, is the shed the thing that moves back and forth?
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
which was so like it was even actually it's so devoid of culture that at one point it was called the Culture Shed, but they took the word culture out and they just called it the Shed.
Oh god. That's so bad.
It's really bad.
I think I remember seeing that when I was at uni and being like, that's such a cool concept. Like, you could have an indoor space and turn it outdoors. Like, wait, what? What? Why would you do that? Just design a better place.
Yeah. I think it was Liz Diller that did it, if I'm not mistaken, and even she had like a very tongue-in-cheek response to how this thing is actually utilized in the end. It's not totally publicly accessible. It's not
Great.
everyday events. It's
Mm.
lots of sponsored content, etc. But let me just read. So I want to read just Heatherwick's description of the vessel, and then we'll go into, how it's being reopened and how this and why it was closed, if we don't already know. So from Thomas Heatherwick himself, the studio was invited to design a public centerpiece for Hudson Yards, a new 11-hectare development on Manhattan's west side that sits above a huge rail yard, really selling it with that. To create something meaningful, the studio wanted to create a structure that visitors would use, touch, and relate to. It develops the idea of a new landmark that could be climbed and explored. Drawing inspiration from the ancient stepwells of India, the studio sought to evoke the powerful effect of their repeating steps, flights, and landings that reach down to the earth. Composed of 154 flights and almost 2,500 steps, the effect of climbing up and down vessels' staircases creates a personal rhythm in each visitor. Rising to 46 meters tall, it lifts them above the square and reveals views across Hudson Yards and Manhattan from 80 platforms arranged around its perimeter. Polished copper-colored undersides contrast with the raw painted steel surfaces of the complex architectural framework, enlivening the structure with reflections of the surrounding city, forming the heart of this large new district. Vessel represents the intention for Hudson Yards to create a meaningful public legacy for New York. I cannot keep.
I can paraphrase that. It's some stairs.
Yeah, it's like the fact it was inspired by ancient stepwells of India in Pakistan. It's like, oh, that's a very cool concept. Your issue there is A, they go into the ground, and B, they have a use.
Yeah, they go somewhere.
Yeah.
You go there to get water. They're not just pretty buildings, they have a use. And then they're also pretty buildings.
It's an absolutely shoehorned concept. They definitely came up with the stepwell idea after somebody was fucking around in Rhino with, I don't know, stair blocks or something. Yeah. I don't know, guys. Related companies paying us $20 million for something. Quick, come up with something.
Dude, that would be so good. If I could get paid that amount of money and pull that shit out of my arse and offer it to the client's like, this is great. That's perfect.
I mean, you need no architectural knowledge to do it. It's just a sculpture at that point.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing of I think the vessel does kind of verge. It holds this weird gap between being just a pure sculpture and being a building, in the same way as a Statue of Liberty and the Eiffel Tower do. But your issue there is those two things were built by the French. We let an American build this one.
Wait, I thought Heatherwick was British.
I don't know.
Is he?
Maybe.
Oh, well, we don't actually have to fact check that. He can be either one of them.
Oh, he is an English designer. Oh god.
Oh shit. Okay, he's British. Well, then can't have that, can we?
The annoying thing is, I do like some of other Heatherwick's other work.
Yeah.
But his little island park is horrendous.
Detailing's bad.
Not only is the detailing bad, the amount of concrete that was needed to make a tiny fucking park in a river is just insane. Just make green space elsewhere.
It's about the size of. It's actually smaller than Hudson Yards, but you could have just not built Hudson Yards.
Yeah, the vessel. So the weird thing as well, from the naming convention of it, the vessel, i.e., to hold something a container. What's it containing? Is it meant to be containing the people, or is it just because it kind of looks like a vase?
I think we're getting somewhere, because what it's clearly meant to hold are the souls of those who have lost their lives in proximity to the vessel. Shit, sorry.
Those poor people.
Well, that's the meat of the thing. So, as it comes down to it, the vessel, unusually, strangely, has been a suicide magnet in New York. It was closed down several times, but most recently, after a total of 4 people have jumped, not fallen, but actually jumped to their deaths in an intentional suicide. And we'll come more to the details of that later. But I just want to like cover this little bit from Dezeen. They talk about how they're going to reopen it and how they're going to address it. So what Dezeen says is the vessel viewpoint. They call it a viewpoint, which I think is very funny for Dezeen.
View yourself.
By Thomas Heatherwick is expected to reopen in New York this year, shrouded by steel netting to prevent people from jumping from its platforms. It follows the closure of the structure in Hudson Yards in 2021 after a 14-year-old boy became the 4th person to die there from suicide. Related companies, the developer behind Hudson Yards, has revealed that the vessel is now due to reopen with more stringent suicide prevention safety measures in place. That's something that you should never think that you would have to read.
I think there's a misconception about suicide too. Like, just because there's a net there doesn't mean the person's not going to kill themselves. They're just going to do it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think it's important to state as well, like, these were tragedies that we're not going to make fun of. Like, one of them was a 14-year-old boy sort of thing. And if anyone is thinking of committing suicide, please seek help. Don't do it. There are loved ones who will be hurt. Down in the description, we'll have a link to a few different helplines that hopefully you can get in contact with and call if needs be.
And of course, absolutely, like Callum said, none of it is to make fun of the victims, but it's more out of shocking. We're more appalled at the shocking disregard of related companies and, to an extent, Heatherwick's compliance with this, and the abysmal and awful response. And like Ben was just saying, like, putting suicide netting on this doesn't actually do anything to prevent suicides. It prevents suicides at a related company's property.
Yep.
They can shove the problem elsewhere.
Yeah, it doesn't address the actual problem.
Yeah. I think the other thing as well when it comes to the suicides is just how this got built in the first place is insane due to the fact that, like, it didn't go through any permission, like, process sort of thing. It was just pushed through, forced through. The public had no influence on this. From what I can tell, no safety standards were regarded on this.
100% correct. It was actually kept completely secret by the CEO of related companies in his little office. He didn't. It's his plaza. He completely owns this part. He actually doesn't have to show anyone anything. But he kept it completely secret. No public notice whatsoever. The guardrails on this are only 1 meter tall. You can accidentally fall over these. It's not like at the top of a skyscraper where they're like, 1.5 meters or even more with glass or something reasonable. They're very easy to accidentally fall over, especially when they're at the bottom of stairs. It's a simple accessibility thing.
Yeah, like, I think the other thing I thought of when I was looking at it, like, there is a lift in this structure, which I honestly didn't think there would be.
I think it was an afterthought.
Yeah, it's definitely an afterthought because it goes up and you can get off at every flight, but on every flight, you're maybe getting 4 square meters worth of area before you have to get on the lift and go back up again.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely an afterthought. So, like, this entire design was designed and built with the pure intention of essentially fuck disabled people because they can't experience what we're building, like, at all.
No, that's 100% correct. And actually, Heatherwick says it himself. I mean, he doesn't say fuck disabled people. To be clear, I am not saying that he said that. But he does, to paraphrase a bit, say that the journey is about the rhythm our body makes as we move up the stairs. He's interested in like the physical activity that it takes to move up and down the stairs, which, I mean, like you're saying, not everybody can do. And it's very unfair.
Like, it's wild to me, stuff like that can be built today. It, like, yes, okay, it's part structure, like sculpture, it's part art piece, it's part architecture, but at the end of the day, when there's a large majority of people who can't ever experience what you're like building,
Yeah.
is that not a huge detriment of what you're building in the first place?
And it's an astounding black mark in New York City, who has a significant number of subway stations, one of the largest metro systems in the world, a significant number of subway stations that are inaccessible to disabled people.
Yeah, it like just to get to the vessel, you need to go up a ramp or up some stairs. Like, why is it not flat to the ground where they don't have to wheel themselves up some ramps in order to get into the structure?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much stuff that's went into this that makes no logical sense when you think about it from an idea of designing it for disabled people. And it shows quite clearly that it wasn't ever designed with them in mind. It was an afterthought. Like, yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that the public weren't involved.
Yeah.
Like,
No doubt.
especially after our last week, where, well, not our last week, but like the last podcast where we discussed how important it is to include the community in a design. Like, this is what you get if you don't include the community. This is a structure that no one really ever truly wanted. It serves no purpose. It takes up area that could serve a purpose. And like, I'm not saying this is structures and art can't go hand in hand. Like, the Statue of Liberty and like the Eiffel Tower are two pretty good examples of neither of these really hold any function other than being good viewing locations or like central locations that you can go visit in tourist traps, essentially.
But you can also see them from a distance. You can't see the fucking vessel from anywhere.
But they also offer other things. Like, in Paris, you get the view, like the Eiffel Tower, you get the view across Paris that's unparalleled, other than the one skyscraper that Paris fails to ever mention that it has. And then the Statue of Liberty, you get the view of New York City, like from a very unique point of view, out like into the ocean, I guess, and like
Yeah.
up at height. Or you have the Empire State Building where you can go all the way up and see the whole skyline. The vessel's not producing anything in terms of actual value to attract someone to it.
I think that you're downplaying how beautiful New Jersey is from a distance.
To be honest, I don't get the New Jersey hate. That's mainly because I'm a Brit. I don't understand it.
I mean, I'm not going to insult New Jersey because I have friends there, and for other reasons, I'm sure I'd probably get shot if I insulted New Jersey. But like, doesn't have a great skyline. Hey, so to continue on the design thing, they're installing floor to ceiling mesh across half of the attraction's passable spaces, and I don't know if you've seen this mesh, if you happen to look at it at all. But I can describe it in words. It's essentially, it looks like chicken mesh. Basically, it's steel wire mesh that's stretched across a frame that goes in front of all of the places where you would normally look out. So instead of something like glass, which could be kind of graceful or something like this, they're literally taking the kebab and they're wrapping it in steel mesh. But this is only through part of the way. The highest level of the structure, according to Dezeen, will remain permanently closed, likely because it's haunted.
I mean, it's all just one big ad anyway, so that's its only purpose.
Yeah, but it's funny, like they chose to do this. Like, I mean, I guess the steel mesh is cheaper than glass, but they chose to go the steel mesh method, which is going to ruin everyone's Instagram photos, and then like
Right.
be detrimental to the advertising.
It's so much of an issue that I can't even, while Googling, I can't even find an image with the mesh on it.
Oh wait, I can send it on the chat. I got one from the New York Post. But it really looks like pretty much what you'd wrap up chickens with, like in a cage to make sure that they don't like fly off.
It really does look like chicken wire. Yeah, because it's intertwined like chicken wire is.
Yeah, exactly. And if you see how it's like stretched across the structure, it has apparently nothing to do with the original architecture. It looks like what you put on a facade of a European building that's like kind of about to fall off.
Yeah, it's too old, so it needs to have the mesh there to catch stuff in case it falls, so it doesn't land on people's heads. Yeah, I know the mesh you're on about.
I think it really complements the polished copper well.
Yeah, I mean the copper is supposed to reflect the city, right? So a cage.
Is that what the copper's there for?
That's what he says in his statement. It reflects the city.
Fuck my life. It's on the bottom of your fucking stairs. If anything, it's just reflecting the people walking up the stairs.
I think that's Heatherwick's entire statement. In New York, you walk. Great.
Cool. Just ignore that. Just ignore America's only transport system. Sure.
The one walkable city in the entire country.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe he was onto something there. Look, I wanted to make like also a bit of a corollary that just it looks like almost the same exact netting that they used at Foxconn. And if you guys don't remember this story, this happened as like 2 years before Steve Jobs died. Foxconn is the company in China that manufactures the iPhone. And apparently Steve Jobs had pushed them to such an intense level of overwork that the workers became very depressed, thought there was no way out. And so there were a huge spate of suicides at the Foxconn factories. People would jump off the building. So instead of fixing the labor issue, which would have meant telling Steve Jobs no, and of course you just can't do that, they installed nets on the building to catch people. And they looked almost exactly like these kinds of nets. So almost been exactly like your point before, it doesn't actually solve the problem. It just pushes the problem away. People don't get less depressed because of this. It just saves face. And a little interesting side note to that, conditions at Foxconn only got better after, of course, after Steve Jobs died, after Tim Apple came to power.
Our Lord and Savior, Tim Apple.
Yeah, I just call him Tim Apple now. I'm sorry, I know it's a Trump thing, but like it got stuck in my head. He's Tim Apple now, forever. Look, conditions at Foxconn only got better after an entire factory threatened mass suicide. And then they realized,
fuck,
okay, we're not actually going to get any phones produced if they all die. So then they started to change things. I'm not saying the population of New York should do this. Of course not. I would never say that. But just to make a point that the nets don't solve it.
Yeah, it's not about actually solving the problem. It's just fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to go like too in detail with the like discussing, too much about the victims because I don't think it helps anything. But so the first one was a 19-year-old who jumped off of the 6th floor. This was, I want to say, in 2020. And just a few months after that, another one, 24-year-old, jumped off of the vessel as well. In 2021, another suicide. And then the vessel was closed and they kind of changed some of their procedures. I'll come to that in a minute. But the final suicide, which happens a little while later, after their change in procedures, was this 14-year-old boy. And since 2021, it's been closed. So pretty much through most of COVID, up until theoretically sometime this year, once they install the netting, they'll reopen it. Related was aware of these suicides, obviously. Their reaction to it wasn't exactly perfect. As a matter of fact, the day after the first suicide, there were still lines to go up the vessel. Security wasn't talking to anyone about it. They were acting like nothing happened. The day after the first suicide. Their original idea was to just brush it away.
Yeah, it's disgusting as it goes.
Which is shocking. They had a few other different attempts to kind of quote unquote mitigate the issue from their perspective, which were low cost and about as laughable as you can get. One is the idea of ambassadors. They don't call them security, they call them ambassadors. And these ambassadors were placed on floors 4 through 8. More of them as the floors went up, because the floors get bigger as it goes up. It's kebab shaped. And the ambassadors are there to make people are following the rules, not doing what they're not supposed to do, but they are to respect the visitor's space and keep their distance because the visitors are tourists.
So that's security. They're just giving a different word.
Yeah.
Calling it an ambassador makes it sound like it's a bit more positive, I guess. Most of the victims were spontaneous in how, they jumped. It wasn't like you could stop them if you were even 2 meters away.
Yeah. I mean, just like the net, you don't solve this with a physical solution.
Their second solution was essentially a buddy system, which is almost as ridiculous as it sounds. From Gothamist, this is Gothamist's post on it. Gothamist said, "Vessel is made extraordinary by the millions of people who visit it with others," a spokesman for Hudson Yards told Gothamist. The team at Vessel is requiring visitors to attend in groups of 2 or more, implementing enhanced guest engagement and screening procedures to detect high-risk behaviors, tripling staff and security, including messaging, developed in partnership with Born This Way at the entrance to the attraction and on all Vessel tickets, and installing National Suicide Prevention Lifeline signage at the entrance. Note this was before the final victim, a 14-year-old boy, jumped in the presence of his own family.
Yeah, all these victims are super young. Like, again, there's an actual problem here that we're just putting Band-Aids on.
Yeah.
100%.
Like, I know where I'm from, we have the Tyne Bridge, which is a bridge across the River Tyne. It's really high up. And because of that, people often jump from it. And it's high enough to the point where even if you do land on the water, you'll die. And if you don't jump directly from the middle, the wind is enough to carry you over onto the concrete, essentially. So quite often, if people do survive, they're like heinously injured for the rest of their lives, or they die. And not much is really done to prevent it, in all honesty, because it's not as frequent as this is, essentially. But even then, across the entire thing, you have national suicide prevention stuff throughout it constantly. Whereas on this, it's only at the entrance.
True. But how much would this even solve?
I'm not sure, because obviously for the latter ones with the ambassadors and the buddy systems, people doing it are making the decision and doing it almost immediately. They're not sitting on the edge and waiting, sort of thing.
I mean, most of the victims did have a history of depression, various other issues, which I don't want to mine for content because I don't feel right about that. But I don't feel like a sign is going to do much other than just make Related feel like they're doing all they can.
I don't think it would, but I also think doing it just at the entrance is far worse than doing it across every floor, sort of thing.
Yeah.
You're choosing, putting it at the entrance is them stating, we want to make sure that people don't commit suicide on our thing, but once you're in it, we don't want you to think about suicide. We don't want you to relate suicide to this property. So we're not going to showcase anything about suicide once you're past the entrance, sort of thing. And at that point, it's just it shows how false it is. At the end of the day, if you did really truly care, you wouldn't have built this in the first place.
Right.
B, you would have done the mesh immediately after the first one.
Right.
Why did it take 2 other systems,
3,
the buddy system?
3 suicides, 2 systems.
Yes, it took 2 other systems and 3 suicides before you ever decided to add like a actual financial penalty to yourself and adjust what this building looked like.
I forgot to
Like,
mention on top of this, I'm sorry to interrupt.
no.
Originally, the vessel was supposed to be free to enter, but I might be wrong after which suicide. It could have been after the second suicide. They increased the price to $10.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that can kind of make sense, but at the end of the day, if you're willing to end your life, $10, even if you're going into debt on it, you're not having to face that debt. So,
Yeah. Look,
like, $10 to you at that point is nothing.
I mean, I guess like
It's not a solution.
it's just a bit ridiculous that they they started charging for it after the suicides.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Think of the image.
Yeah. It's just so mind-boggling that it took all of this tragedy for them. Like, yes, it's not solving the issue. At the end of the day, it's a core issue to society as a whole, in my opinion. It's not something a building by itself can solve. But at the end of the day, adding the meshes does solve the issue of suicide. Yeah, it pushes it down the line. These people want to commit suicide, they'll just do it elsewhere, sort of thing.
But
But
how at what point, like, you can put the meshes on there, but the thing is, everyone knows why the meshes are there.
yeah,
The meshes tell a story. So does this thing even become attractive anymore? The same as if you covered it in signage, if you had people going around asking if you were okay constantly, something like this.
yeah,
Like, it's not really the same kind of attraction, and it's never ever going to be the same. It's never going to be an attraction where you can like go and enjoy your Instagram, because now you
yeah,
literally have a specter behind you of death.
yeah. I think the building itself needs to shift the aim. It needs to become not a tourist attraction. It needs to become a memorial to the people that lost their lives on it.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. And at least like a beacon of awareness itself that you literally cannot go inside of.
Yeah. Well, even if you can go inside of it, keeping that netting up to prevent anyone else from doing something, or adjusting the structure where getting rid of the netting, but it's because of the way it's designed, you could have like large glass walls going up into the floor of the staircase above. You could
Yeah.
entirely enclose that thing. Yes, people could still jump the other way. They could still jump like further, like inwards into the vessel, sort of thing, which could cause damage and enough to kill them, sort of thing, kill themselves. In which case, it might be an entirely enclosed journey, or you might have mesh on the internals and glass on the outside. But I think it needs to lose the tourist attraction aspect of it and become a memorial to the people that have killed themselves on it. Like, and I think it could be a pretty powerful memorial as well.
Yeah. I worry. I mean, like we can I want to talk about the community's, response to this a bit. Um yes, actually keep that thought in mind, because I think it's really worth diving into that. I just want to like I don't want to lose that there has been a little bit of community action on this. Um Community board number 4, which is the community around in which Hudson Yards is part, did send a letter to related companies in 2020, um, which from actually the city of New York's own website. They say, quote, "We are not unmindful that related is also saddened and concerned about this sorrowful loss of life. Apparently, however, the morning after the young man's death," talking about the previous suicide, according to the New York Times, dozens of visitors waited in line to enter the sculpture. No areas appeared to be restricted, and a security guard was not aware of any extra security measures, but said guards were trained to look out for possible suicides. The letter continues, "Given the fact that sometimes no one, not even parents or close friends, can know the private torment a suicidal person is suffering, we might all feel less than reassured by the security guard's training. When someone jumps to his death from a high place, it is by its nature a public act. It resonates deeply in the community's consciousness." And that's from the local community itself. Uh, So Related's response to this was essentially the buddy system. That's the best they could do with that.
The fact they also tried to pitch the buddy system as it's better experienced with other people. The thing is, that is probably the case. It probably is better experienced with other people because there's fuck all to do. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you shouldn't be advertising your anti-suicide measures as this is just better because other people are there. Like,
Yeah.
no,
doesn't solve
fuck
anything.
off.
And look, the suicide issue was not something that like is unexpected. As a matter of fact, in 2016, the architecture writer Audrey Wax, she's writing then an architect's newspaper. I think she still writes for architect's newspaper. She wrote in 2016, well before it was completed. She just saw the renderings. As one climbs up vessel, the railings stay just above waist height all the way up to the structure's top. But when you build high, folks will jump. After a student leapt into the soaring central atrium of New York University's Bobst Library 7 years ago, the school installed metal fencing on top of the plexiglass barriers it had put in years earlier in response to the other suicides. Philip Johnson and Richard Foster didn't see the death in the design that the public's morbid ideation uncovered, but Ross and Heatherwick seem not to have learned from Bobst or from the city's bridges and iconic tall buildings. If barriers are installed, how will they affect the views, the vessel's main selling point? I just think it's very interesting that Audrey Vox brings up that point well before vessel's completion, as if it should have been on Heatherwick to realize this issue at the beginning.
I mean, yeah, it should have been. Like, I remember when I went to school, like secondary school, which is like kind of high school in America, sort of age. We had it was a 4-story building, and there was a central atrium that was open to all 4 floors. And I remember I never did, but being like on the 4th floor and having that morbid thought of like, I'd die if I jumped off right now, sort of thing. Like, and that's only 4 stories. Imagine going to, and like, these were high, like railings as well. They were like chest level height, at least on me. But I mean, I'm short. But like, they were like chest level height. They weren't 1 meter sort of thing. They were relatively high. But if you wanted to, you could easily climb over and jump.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And that was only for 4 stories. Taking it to 8 stories, and it being lower, like, someone's morbid thoughts might just pull them over the edge at the end of the day.
It seems like a complete oversight. It's like an architect didn't even think. Obviously, we've already established, he didn't think about the disabled.
Yeah.
He certainly didn't think about anybody with suicidal ideation, or most likely anybody other than his own sketches and ambitions with this, and money.
Yeah. Like, it's wild. Like, I've designed quite a few places now, and like that have ended up as people's homes and stuff like that. And even when I'm designing a bedroom, I think about all of the different acts that like take place in a space like that, how you can design around it, sort of thing, to make said acts better, sort of thing. How don't you consider when you're making an 8-story structure that is meant to be open to look well out into the distance, sort of thing? How do you not make that link of this is going to be an issue, this is too high?
Right.
We need to, at the end of the day, it should have been closed off from the beginning.
Totally.
Like, there's nothing stopping you closing that off entirely with a glass facade around the outside. You still get the same effect of looking at the structure. You still get the same effect of walking up and down the structure. It's not detrimented by the fact that wind can't get to you.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
doesn't change anything.
It's just this like romantic notion that you should be open to the air to experience it. I mean, but literally, it's up to architects to be aware of their constituents. And I mean, no one would ever jump to think like, of course, it's not normal to think about suicide. It's not to say. I'm not trying to say that depression is abnormal, like this kind of thing, but it's
Yeah.
not the first thing you think about when you're designing a building. But you should be considering how any kind of person, whether they're disabled or have suicidal ideation or just elderly even, can possibly experience your project. I mean, as it is, only the fittest and mentally healthiest seem to be the optimal type of person to experience this hyper specific, unique destination.
With the high prices and everything, they're doing exclusivity in their own way. They don't need to include anybody if they can just raise the prices enough, and only the people that can't afford it will be able in.
Yeah, I mean, like, also there's something to be said, and it's like you almost don't want to say it for like the you may be too sound too cynical, but it's almost like they only want the healthiest, most beautiful people to be Instagramming their experience.
Totally. It's exactly that. That's why every commercial, every movie has the most beautiful, fit people ever. And I mean, you wouldn't even think fat people exist if you were just looking at advertising in movies.
Yeah, if you go on the Hudson Yards website and you scroll through like the images they have for their advertising at the shops and the restaurants, it's all like supermodel looking people. And it's advertised as like, come here and experience this, experience this, experience this. But it doesn't look like I should go there, or I don't look like I don't know, some blonde bimbo who was paid to sit in this photo shoot. You know?
But I think the private money says it all. It was never built for the public. When people like that say the public, they don't mean themselves. They mean the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have an interesting thought.
Okay.
Do you think that not just morally, but criminally, do you think Heatherwick is liable for this?
Ooh.
Would you state that because of this design, it has led to these people's death? And do you think Heatherwick should go down for it? Because I do.
Guys, you didn't know this. You didn't know this about me? I'm a lawyer.
It's all good, man.
I have a law degree that I got by doing a quiz on the internet. I am qualified to answer this question. Send his ass to the chair.
Maybe not now, but like, I do, like, the fact they are getting away with this, and let's be honest, they were always going to get away with this, because at the end of the day, suicide's literally just seen as an issue on that specific person rather than a societal issue and an issue with the circumstances that that person found themselves in at that exact moment. But if you've designed something where, like, specifically designed it, crafted it by hand, you drew out the plans, sort of thing, you signed your name to it, you advertise that you've done it, and then people start killing themselves on it on a regular basis because you've not taken the correct precautions to stop someone doing that, I think it should not only tarnish your reputation, but it might and should be something considered to be criminally negligent.
100%. And you know how that happens? Is like it's two ways. One, there has to be kind of an understanding that a suicide is not something that you just wake up and decide to do one morning. It is something that is caused by a greater force in society. It's a feeling of hopelessness that society generates in us. And so as such, like, you cannot hold a suicide victim personally responsible for this. And until you concede this, you're never going to see Heatherwick's his decision to have low hand railings at 8 stories off of the ground, to be his fault. To be able to put the suicides on him. because you see it as something individualistic, not a reaction to society, as it should be.
Yeah. The sad and upsetting thing as well is it's probably not even his fault. Because let's be honest, he probably never touched this project, or maybe like put in a specific thing at the get go, and a pot like an assistant when it did the actual project itself. Like it might not be him that's liable, but it should be him that goes down for it. Like if he's the one, yeah, if he's the one that's getting the reputation for it, he should be the one that goes down for it, sort of thing. Like at the end of the day, there was probably some assistant or intern who actually fully did this design. Yes, it may have passed through the hands of Heatherwick at some point, but he didn't fucking design it.
The same with Edison too. I was just saying it's the same as like Thomas Edison too. It's his studio, his factory or whatever.
Oh yeah, definitely. Wait, and Thomas Edison, for our listeners that don't know, had one great invention in his whole career. That was that of the intern. And then everything else was just from those interns.
I mean, it's a similar sort of approach to what Elon Musk does.
Yeah.
Essentially, he hires some of the smartest people in the world. They give him good ideas, and then he announces them, makes them sound like shit because it's coming from his mouth. But at the end of the day, some of those ideas aren't bad because some of the smartest people in the world have came up with it. They just happen to be his employees and not him, sort of thing. Like,
but in an architecture office, there's a lot of laws in place, and there's a lot of like strict procedures that you have to follow when you build a building. That's why you get a license, and when you get a license, you get a stamp. And when you create a project, the architect puts a stamp on it. And that says that whatever is in these drawings, I am legally responsible to make sure it doesn't kill anyone, to make sure it doesn't collapse, so on and so forth. Even if there's 100 interns on the project, 100, I don't know, you farmed the drawings out to India. I don't know what you did. You still have to agree that it's all legally correct when you put your stamp on it. And now, I don't know who stamped the Heatherwick drawings, but to me, there must be some extreme oversight. I know it's not in the code, but maybe we should look at the code that allowed these handrails to exist, that allowed a structure like this to exist.
From the sounds of it, it never went through code to begin with.
It had to have gone through code.
Really? It never like
I mean,
I know in the UK, if you build something and it hasn't went through code, you're forced to tear it down. I don't see that necessarily. Is that the case in the US? Like, if you fully build something and it's not put in for like planning permission or like building control or however you guys like fully like apply a building to the public sort of thing.
Yeah, you've got to get
if it doesn't, so you've got to get it permitted.
Yeah, and then there's code compliance.
Will it get torn down if it doesn't succeed any of those things?
I mean, you got to get it permitted before you build it, and that process.
But what if you build it before it? Will it get torn down? Because in the UK, it will. You're forced to tear it down 99% of the time. Not always. There are cases where you can prove after the fact that it's still built like to the correct standards.
I've never seen it happen. I mean, I don't know if it would get torn down or just you'd have to modify it. But in this case, the entire architectural process of building something in New York is very, very sketchy. And I did a little bit of research, and I don't want to like make any journalistic claims here. I did a little bit of research. New York's permitting website is open to the public, and you can go search the permits yourself. If you plug in the address for that's associated with the vessel, and I forgot the address, 20 Hudson Yards or something like that. Maybe it's 21. Mm-hmm. If you go search that address and you start to filter it down, there's only about 4 permits that were approved for the site of the vessel. None of those coincide with the construction date. They're all for the past 2 years or so. I don't know what that means. I'm not a journalist. I'm not saying it wasn't permitted. Don't believe me. I'm just saying I couldn't find a permit.
I think because it never went through any of the public checks that it's necessarily supposed to, and because they could just build it behind closed doors, essentially,
Yeah.
I think they've built it and just opened it up to the public because the owners of the land are rich enough to the point where they don't necessarily need to go through the correct channels.
That
And
sounds like New
ultimately
York.
what's ended up happening is this disaster. You've got a design which is negligent in its design and ultimately is helping to contribute to people's deaths.
Yeah.
Quite
Yeah.
simply.
100%.
It is negligence at the end of the day.
100%. I mean, I don't know what you do with the vessel now. I mean, you talked about making a memorial out of it, talked about demolishing it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, this might come from my own personal experience of disasters and stuff like this, but memorials can be a nice way for a community to collectively mourn.
Yeah.
And sort of thing. So I remember when I first finally got the chance to visit the Manchester bombing memorial for the bombing at the Ariana Grande concert memorial, in which I lost someone in it, sort of thing. And it's an incredibly powerful thing. And being able to see a friend's name in this memorial is harrowing. It's sort of thing. But to ultimately see that it's not just me grieving, it's the entire collective community is grieving, sort of thing.
Right.
And maybe necessarily you do remove it and you build a new memorial in its place rather than leaving it up. But I think there's something to leaving it where it is, putting precautions in there to stop further incidents happening, but leaving it and advertising it as a memorial to these people could be a very interesting way to deal with it.
I mean,
rather
it's
than
the cynic in me saying that if you leave it as it is and you advertise it as a memorial, it's still doing exactly what Ben said, and it's an advertisement for Hudson Yards. It's still the
Yeah.
same thing. You're just trying to, I mean, I guess counter signal the capitalist thing that you were doing before, and now you're admitting to it while still trying to draw advertising revenue.
Yeah, I think the major thing is it needs to obviously be free. You can't have people paying to go up to it, sort of thing. And then the other thing is ultimately at the end of the day, it should be the community in and of itself that makes the decision of whether it becomes a memorial or not. Talk to the families and friends that were involved with the people that decided to take their lives that day, and also talk to the wider community and how they feel about the project. And if the wider community and the people who lost their family of the people that lost their lives all collectively agree that the thing should be demolished and something else should be built in its place, then that should be what's done, sort of thing. At the end of the day, it should be the collective decision rather than it shouldn't be in the hands of whoever owns whoever owns Hudson Yards. They should have no choice over what happens to the structure. It should entirely be up to the collective community.
I mean, and if we want to give the community that power, the only solution then is to nationalize related companies by force or by process. So
Yeah.
These guys got to go.
I mean, there is some interesting ideas of what we could do with that land as well, outside of just a memorial.
I mean, yeah, look, all of these towers, these luxury towers, you saw these apartments. I was posting the apartments.
Those apartments are shit, but they're so expensive because of New York.
They're so tiny. I mean, my apartment is 35 square meters, and if you put it in one of the Hudson Yards buildings, it would cost like $2 million on a lower floor.
Yeah, it's insane.
I mean, and these apartments are like so fucking expensive and full of such ridiculous amenities. Weirdly, they all have telescopes that are drawn on the plans. I don't know what you're looking at. Again, either
Weird.
your neighbors or New Jersey. I'm not sure.
There's too many lights anyway.
Huh?
There's too many lights for a telescope anyway. I've always wondered that too.
I don't know what you're doing with
Oh,
this.
yeah, that's a good point.
I
Yeah, the
mean,
city that never sleeps that has so much light pollution that you definitely can't see any stars. Like, what's that telescope for, bud?
it's really just peeping into your neighbors on the other side of Hudson Yards, while you
Oh,
ignore the
yeah.
suicides at the vessel below.
Like, yeah, I think it would be interesting to see a social housing development there.
I mean, it
in
would be
that
really
land
cool to
space.
do a project to turn a skyscraper into a social housing project, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
Absolutely.
100%, yeah.
I mean, they're talking about outlawing homelessness when there's empty buildings everywhere. It's fucking
Yeah.
insanity. And
Insane.
again, it's like the suicide thing where you'd rather have a physical response or a legality thing to an issue that needs an actual different solution,
Yeah.
or that, has a more humanitarian solution.
It's not the first time that related companies have come up against this issue either, because they were sued several years after one of the buildings at Hudson Yards opened, because they had what's in New York called a pour door on one of their buildings. So every skyscraper in New York, every residential building in New York is supposed to have a certain percentage of affordable apartments set aside, which is very good. We love that. But
Oh,
they're
no.
supposed to use the same entry. What related companies did was make a pour door, which is a separate entrance,
That's so
separate
bad.
circulation for the affordable apartments.
That's
This was
fucked.
outlawed by, I want to say, Bloomberg outlawed it, or the guy before this idiot Eric Adams, whatever he was, outlawed it. But of course, you can still get around it. So it's not the first time that related has come up against, you know, looking outwards towards the community, and trying to do some bullshit to get around that. These guys are awful.
It's genuinely fucked.
Yeah. Hey, look, I don't know. We can probably wrap things up now with a few notes, and I think, at least from my perspective, whoever's, and I'm saying this, nobody else is representative of this thought. Whoever's in charge of these decisions at related companies, whoever's not caring about the community and more interested in the profits that these luxury amenities can bring, you guys got to be the first up against the wall when we take this land back for everyone around this awful development.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see it on cinder blocks and all the copper stripped off of it.
Yeah.
So take the copper off of it, man. Actually, that's a good idea. I bet we can get some money for that. Give it back to the community.
True.
Put it to an actual use.
For real.
Yeah, it's still mind-boggling to me that they based it off something that has an innate use of, in case of a drought, there'll still be water here, and just went, nah, we're not gonna give this a use. It's like, what, why?
Entirely pointless.
You could have made a step well. That would have been super cool.
It's a community feature in and of itself.
Yeah. Like, put a community swimming pool at the bottom of it.
Brilliant.
Like, that shit would be cool as hell.
That doesn't satisfy the fetish of exclusivity.
True.
Totally.
Israel being a great example of it.
Yeah.
Totally.
I do think as well, though, you can't build the stepwells today just for safety concerns. Like the same way you shouldn't have built the vessel. Yeah, exactly. Which ruins the stepwell.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, there is types of designs that used to exist that are great and beautiful that should not ever be built again.
100%. I don't know what the next memorial in New York is going to bring, or the next public-private, not memorial, public-private sculpture is going to bring. I'm
Oh God,
hoping
don't
to
you just
see
love public places
gigantic-
that are owned by companies?
Exactly. I'm hoping to see the next one of those brings along with it a giant copper Stonehenge or something like this. That's 20 times as large, or I don't know, maybe an upside down stone pyramid. I don't know. Equally ridiculous. Make a
Yeah.
fucking public plaza.
Right.
it
Well,
back to
on
the
that positive note,
people.
let's end this out.
Yeah.
So I'm Callum.
I'm Zach.
Ben.
All right. Thanks for joining us, y'all.
See you next time.
Architecture could be an instrument of freedom and it could be an instrument of repression. And if you feel that this is pre-given, you've given up on the fight, we're lost.